The first time my mother told my boyfriend that my sister was the better choice, I was standing outside the kitchen door, clutching a half-empty glass of champagne at my cousin's engagement party. The words sliced through me like a scalpel, precise and unforgiving. Lillian is sweet, Daniel, but let's be honest, Evelyn has always been the one with real ambition. The kind of woman who elevates a man like you. My mother's voice was smooth, as if she were discussing the weather, not orchestrating the ruin of my relationship. I peered through the crack in the door, watching Daniel's face shift from polite discomfort to something far worse, consideration. He didn't defend me, didn't laugh it off. Just stood there, gripping our forgotten drinks, absorbing every poisonous word. You and Evelyn would make a powerful pair, my mother continued, patting his arm with a maternal warmth that twisted my stomach into knots. She's always admired you. And let's face it, Lillian's art career isn't exactly going places, is it? The cruel dismissal of my struggling gallery work stung, but it was Daniel's slow, thoughtful nod that shattered me. I backed away, my heels silent on the marble floor, my breath coming in shallow bursts. I should have stormed in. Should have thrown my drink in his face. Instead, I pasted on a smile and endured the rest of the evening like a ghost haunting her own life. That was my first mistake. The unraveling was slow, methodical. Daniel began mentioning Evelyn in casual conversation. Her latest corporate Tory, her disciplined workout routine, the way she commanded a room. Each comment was a paper cut, small but cumulative. Then came the canceled dates, the sudden late nights at work, the texts between them I wasn't meant to see. It's nothing, Daniel insisted when I confronted him. We ran into each other at a coffee shop. She's your sister, Lil. It'd be weird if we didn't get along. But at family dinners, their shared glances across the table spoke volumes. My best friend Naomi saw it before I admitted it to myself. He looks at you differently now, she murmured after Daniel left another dinner early, citing work stress. Like you're optional. The final betrayal came 3 months later. I let myself into Daniel's apartment with the key. He'd given meth one we joked was a step toward MYing in together. The silence should have warned me. A trail of clothing led to the bedroom. Evelyn's designer blouse crumpled on the floor, the door slightly ajar. The sounds inside confirmed what I already knew. I dropped the concert tickets I brought as a surprise. They fluttered to the ground like confetti for a celebration I wasn't invited to. Daniel scrambled upright, guilt flashing across his face. Evelyn merely sighed, as if I were an inconvenient interruption. You were going to find out eventually, she said, unapologetic. How long? My voice was eerily calm. 2 months, Daniel admitted. But we've been talking longer. Since Mom's little chat, I finished. Their silence was confirmation enough. I left without screaming, without breaking anything. The rage would come later in violent, silent sobs in Naomi's guest room. But in that moment I was hollow. When I confronted my mother the next day, her lack of remorse was the final blow. Don't be dramatic, Lillian, she said, arranging peonies in a vase. Evelyn and Daniel suit each other. You'll find someone better suited to your temperament. Her fingers brushed my cheek, cool and dismissive. You've always been the dreamer. Evelyn is the doer. It's just the way things are. That night I packed my car with everything that mattered me: art supplies, my SAVYNGS, and a determination forged in heartbreak. I left a note for Daniel, Evelyn, and my mother. Watch me thrive. Chicago welcomed me with a thunderstorm. The rain hammered against my windshield as I navigated the unfamiliar streets, my GPS leading me to a dingy motel on the outskirts of the city. The room smelled of stale cigarettes and industrial cleaner. I sat on the edge of the stiff mattress, surrounded by hastily packed boxes, and allowed myself 5 minutes to cry. Then I opened my laptop and began rebuilding my life. The next 6 months were a blur of survival. I took a job as a barista, sketching portraits of customers during slow shifts. One of them, a sharp-eyed businessman named Adrian Cole, lingered over his coffee longer than necessary, studying my work. You're wasted here, he said bluntly. Tell that to my student loans, I replied. He left his card on the counter. I own a consulting firm. We need someone with an eye for design. If you're interested. I stared at it for a full day before calling. Adrian wasn't what I expected, ruthless in business but unexpectedly patient with me. He hired me as a junior designer, then promoted me within a year when I streamlined our client presentations. We worked late nights, fueled by takeout and ambition, our professional boundaries blurring into something deeper. "You're a mystery, Lillian," he said once over Vietnamese sandwiches. "Most people love talking about themselves. Most people have stories worth sharing," I deflected. He studied me. "I think yours is." Our relationship was unconventional. It began with stolen glances during meetings, then escalated into heated arguments over marketing strategies that ended with us tangled in his office couch. We were fire and gasoline, passionate but volatile. Then came the night everything changed. Adrian's father, a steel magnate, summoned him to a family dinner. He asked me to come. "As my partner," he clarified. The coal estate was a monument to old money. His father barely glanced at me, dismissing me as another of Adrian's distractions. His mother was polite but distant. But it was his brother Marcus who recognized me. "Lillian de Vys?" He smirked. "From Philadelphia? Evelyn's sister." Adrian stiffened beside me. I hadn't told him about my family. Marcus leaned in, his voice dripping with faux sympathy. "Daniel Whitmore just married Evelyn last month. Nasty divorce from his first wife, though. Guess he finally got what he wanted." The room spun. I excused myself, fleeing to the garden, where Adrian found me minutes later. "You never told me," he said quietly. "It wasn't your business." "It is if we're serious." His jaw tightened. "Who the hell lets their family steal their boyfriend?" The words were a slap. "You think I let them?" "No." He exhaled. "But I think you've been running ever since. And I need to know if you're done." The next morning, I booked a flight to Philadelphia. Evelyn's wedding photos were everywhere, splashed across society blogs, framed in my mother's foyer. Daniel looked polished and satisfied. Evelyn triumphant. I stood on their doorstep unannounced and rang the bell. The shock on their faces was worth every second of pain. "Lillian." Evelyn's smile faltered. "What are you?" "I came to thank you," I said calmly. "If you hadn't taken Daniel, I'd still be the girl who settled for scraps. Instead, I'm the COO of Cole Consulting. And Adrian." I smiled. "He makes Daniel look like a middle manager." Daniel's face darkened. "You're here to gloat?" "No." I met Evelyn's eyes. "I'm here to say you can keep him. Because I finally realized I was never the one who lost something that day. You were." I turned and walked away, their stunned silence echoing behind me. This time I wasn't running. I was flying. The flight back to Chicago was turbulent, matching the storm of emotions churning inside me. I stared out the window at the clouds, replaying the confrontation in my mind. The look on Evelyn's face, part shock, part fury, had been satisfying. But the hollowness in Daniel's eyes had been unexpected. He hadn't looked triumphant anymore. Just tired. Adrian was waiting at the airport, leaning against his car with that unreadable expression of his. He didn't ask how it went. Just opened the passenger door and said, "You hungry?" We drove to a dimly lit Italian place he frequented, the kind with checkered tablecloths and wine that tasted like nostalgia. Halfway through my pasta, I finally broke the silence. "They looked miserable." Adrian swirled his wineglass. "Good. No, I mean really miserable." Evelyn was wearing this forced smile, and Daniel kept checking his phone like he was waiting for an escape. Adrian studied me. "You feel sorry for them?" "No," I stabbed a piece of rigatoni. "But I thought I'd feel more." He reached across the table, his fingers brushing mine. "That's because you're not the same person they broke." The next morning, I walked into Cole Consulting with my head high. The office buzzed with the usual energy, mails firing, interns scrambling, the scent of too strong coffee in the air. But something had shifted. The weight I'd carried for years was gone. Marcus intercepted me near the elevators, his smirk firmly in place. "So, how was the reunion?" "Enlightening." I adjusted my blazer. "Turns out my sister's marriage is as stable as a house of cards in a windstorm." His smirk faded. "You're not upset?" "Why would I be?" I smiled. I've got a company to run. Adrian promoted me to COO that afternoon. The announcement email included a single line at the bottom. Lillian's VY Shaun has been instrumental in our growth. The future is ours to build. I forwarded it to my mother. Weeks passed. The seasons changed. Chicago's brutal winter gave way to a tentative spring, and with it came an unexpected email. Subject, dinner? The sender, Daniel Whitmore. I stared at the screen, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Part of me wanted to delete it. The other part, the part that still remembered the boy he'd been before ambition twisted him, hesitated. Adrian leaned over my shoulder, reading the email. His breath was warm against my ear. You going? I shouldn't. But. I sighed. But I want to look him in the eye one last time. Adrian kissed my temple. Then go. Daniel chose a quiet restaurant downtown, the kind with leather booths and whiskey flights. He was already seated when I arrived, his suit impeccable, his hair slightly grayer at the temples. Lillian. He stood, awkward. You look amazing. Thanks. I slid into the booth, not bothering with small talk. Why are you here, Daniel? He exhaled, swirling his drink. I wanted to apologize. For cheating on me? Or for marrying my sister? Both. His gaze flicked to my left hand, where Adrian's ring glittered. You're engaged. I am. A pause. Then quietly. Is he good to you? I laughed. You don't get to ask that. Daniel's jaw tightened. Evelyn and I are divorcing. The words should have felt like Viwaitori. Instead they just felt sad. I'm sorry, I said, and meant it. He stared into his glass. Your mother was wrong, you know. About you. I know. I should have. But you didn't. I stood, dropping cash on the table. Goodbye, Daniel. The wedding was in June. Adrian insisted on a rooftop ceremony, the Chicago skyline stretching around us like a promise. Naomi cried. Marcus grudgingly admitted the food was good. And my mother hoed RSVP'd at the last minute, sat in the back, her expression unreadable. She approached me during the reception, her champagne flute trembling slightly. You've done well for yourself. I have. A pause. Then softly. I was wrong about you. The admission hung between us, fragile as glass. I could have shattered it. Could have thrown her words back in her face. Instead I kissed her cheek. Thank you for coming, Mom. Her eyes glistened. For the first time in years she hugged me. Later, under the stars, Adrian pulled me close. Happy. I leaned into him, watching our friends laugh on the dance floor. Yeah. No regrets. I thought of Daniel's hollow eyes, Evelyn's crumbling marriage, my mother's tearful hug. No regrets. Adrian spun me into the music, and for the first time in my life I didn't look back. The morning after our wedding, I woke to sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of our penthouse, Adrian's arm draped protectively across my waist. The diamond on my left hand caught the light, scattering prismatic patterns across the sheets. Last night's celebration still hummed in my veins, the laughter, the tears, the way Adrian had whispered mine, as we danced under the stars. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A New York number. Lillian, it's Miranda Priestley, the editor-in-chief of Runway magazine. We're doing a feature on power couples in business. You and Adrian made the list. Adrian stirred behind me, his lips grazing my shoulder. Who's trying to steal you from me at 8 a.m.? I turned in his arms, smiling. Just Runway magazine. Apparently we're interesting. He groaned, pulling me closer. Tell them we're busy being disgustingly in love. The Runway photo shoot took place 3 weeks later in our Chicago office. The photographer had us posed at Adrian's desk, my hand resting on his shoulder as we reviewed financial reports. Gorgeous, Miranda murmured, watching through the lens. The artist and the tycoon. Perfect dichotomy. Adrian's fingers tightened around mine. We prefer equals. The resulting spread the coals. Building an empire on trust, hit newsstands the same week Evelyn's divorce was finalized. The call came on a Tuesday. Lillian. My mother's voice was uncharacteristically small. Evelyn's in the hospital. Panic clawed at my throat. What happened? Stress-induced collapse. The divorce, the firm. She's been working 18-hour days. A pause. She asked for you. Adrian booked the flight before I could process the request. Evelyn looked fragile in the hospital bed. Her usual sharp edges softened by exhaustion. The 4 drips snaked into her arm, the monitors beeping a steady rhythm. Come to gloat. Her voice was hoarse. I pulled a chair to her bedside. No. She turned her face away. Daniel left me for his assistant. 23 years old. I didn't see it coming. The irony wasn't lost on me. Mom was wrong about us, I said quietly. It was never about who was stronger, just who was happier. Evelyn's shoulders shook. For the first time in our lives, I saw my sister cry. Adrian and I stayed in Philadelphia for 2 weeks. We converted my mother's sunroom into a temporary office. Conference calls with Tokyo and London conducted over her antique tea VYC. You've built something remarkable, my mother admitted one evening, watching Adrian explain blockchain technology to her bridge club. We have, I corrected. She touched my cheek, her eyes suspiciously bright. I'm proud of you. 3 simple words. 30 years in the making. The epilogue came 5 years later, at the opening of the Lillian Cole Arts Foundation in Chicago. My mother and Evelyn sat in the front row, Adrian's hand warm at the small of my back as I addressed the crowd. This foundation isn't about creating artists, I said, gazing at the students in attendance. It's about reminding them their dreams have value even when others disagree. Afterward, as champagne flowed through the gallery, Evelyn pulled me aside. I'm applying for the director position at your Philadelphia branch. I blinked. You're GIVYing up corporate law? Turns out, she smiled wryly, I like sleeping occasionally. Adrian appeared with 2 flutes of champagne, handing one to each of us. To new beginnings? We clinked glasses, 3 people who'd taken very different paths to the same truth. The greatest revenge isn't success. It's peace.